All right,
all that.
welcome everybody. Welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness podcast. I'm your host, Nino Gonzalez, joined today again by Pei Chen. Pei, how's it going?
Hey, Nino, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to have you as my co-host. As always, this is kind of the first of many episodes we're hoping. And so what I wanted to discuss today was a little bit about how we met. On the last episode, we discussed who we are, a little bit about our backgrounds, but now I want to discuss kind of how we met, how we came into this world together, and then also the name, right? Because a lot of how we met ties into the name that we decided for this podcast. And then from there, that also ties into our definitions of being rich versus being wealthy. So you've been part of the community that I joined later on. So do you want to kind of give a brief intro to how we met?
Sure. It seems like a long time ago, but
Mhm.
I think we've only actually known each other for about a year now.
A little
So
more.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We met through a online chat group.
It's a good way to put it.
Online chat group for investors.
Yeah.
But actually, it was through a company called TARDIS, and they are a coaching company, financial coaching company that offers, a strategy that's unique to them, and they coach clients kind of through their hopes and dreams and what they're looking to accomplish in their lives through a fairly special method called the income snowball. And through that process of being their client and doing it for a number of years, I stumbled upon a chat community, and it's just all of the same people doing the same thing at the same time, right? And we're just all at varying different stages of investing and kind of trying to change our lives. I've been with a client of theirs for about 5 years, and Nino, you came onto the scene, and I still remember, it's like, who is this kid? Just thirsty for knowledge and thirsty for kind of speeding everything up, and just not taking things as status quo. As we remember from our last episode, we kind of talk about where we are and in life and kind of our personalities. Your nickname is Speedy Gonzalez for a reason, right? About you is just like, hey, let's not wait, let's get going, let's take action. So we just kind of clicked and got to know each other really well, and here we are, right, doing it
It's
together. It's
it's
all
so
all
funny.
stemmed from that. It's crazy.
Right. It's funny because I've never taken the word thirsty as a compliment, but now I feel like it is. So I appreciate that. No, I think I was spoiled. I think when I joined the community, when I became a part of TARDIS, it felt like at first I was kind of going to do this on my own. I understand the basic premise, met with my coach and kind of went for it. But then very quickly I met you. I remember, I'll never forget this, when you had posted about like a little get together that you guys had in the Houston area. And I thought, oh, that would be cool. I'd love to just like learn from people who have been doing it or are currently doing it with me. I remember when we first met, you mentioned that for the first few years, you didn't really have that. And I couldn't imagine being part of this journey, this whole financial journey, without having that community. Of course, in particular, you and Mike, but just in general, being able to go through things and learn through things with people, both wins and losses, I think has been huge. So yeah, it's one of those things that when we talked about before, relationships, right? When you meet people, you kind of have that click. I actually just finished this book called Love Life, which is Matt Hussey wrote it, and it's mainly geared towards relationships, right? And how to look for a partner, a life partner, a healthy relationship. But it also ties into just building organically natural relationships with people. And I think about how powerful that is, and it was the right place at the right time, being able to connect with like-minded people. And from there it was, well, you have those personalities, let's go together. And I thought that was incredible. And since then, I've met some pretty amazing people on this journey, and both in person, but primarily over our chats, right? A lot of people, you see them for the first time and they're like, hey, come into my house or come into my car. And that's almost counter to what we've been taught as children. Do not talk to strangers. Do not get into their cars. but
Absolutely. And it's just we feel that we are on the same wavelength with people in this community because we all speak the same lingo, right?
Mm.
So we just able to help each other get to the next level faster because of being with each other, spending that time. I someone said the saying, and I take it to heart. It's where the energy goes, progress grows, right? Something like
Mm.
that. So think about whatever energy that you focus on, right? And part of the reason of this podcast being named Finding Financial Fitness was we kind of went through that, right? What do we want to focus our time, right? Obviously, money is one big driver in our day-to-day conversation and thought process, but that part that you come in where fitness is one of those things that it's almost, if you think of a stool, right? You have a stool, it doesn't balance well on just two legs, right? It's a three-legged stool that we'll kind of talk about. So fitness is one of that, wealth is one of that. And then what is the third leg, you think?
I think the third leg is mental well-being. I think some people will call it spiritual health. Some people will call it mental health. So there's different names for it, but I think a lot of it has to do with the mind. A lot of it has to do with how you feel. And because when we got into this, and I'm speaking more for myself here, but going into this field of making money, there's many terms out there on the internet that people will use. One of the most common ones is the FIRE movement, right? Which stands for financial independence, retire early, which just means retire early, stop working, and be financially independent, that you don't need to work anymore. But I think there's a movement, a counter movement to the FIRE movement now, talking about, well, what happens after that? Because people think, and I'm speaking from experience here, that you're going to get to a certain financial point where you make X amount of money, be it passive or active income, and you'll have this sudden feeling of, I've arrived, and that's it. I'm going to kick my feet up. I'm going to go to the beach and I'm just going to stay there, and I'm going to have no more responsibilities, and that's it. So that in my mind was what the FIRE movement meant. And then there was other words for it, where financial freedom, right? That's the date or where your passive income is greater than your monthly expenses, right? All you need to worry about that ratio, the 2-to-1, where you need to have passive income double what your monthly expenses are, and you can live off of that for the rest of your life. There's many ways, there's many discussions about it, but one of the biggest things that people don't mention is, like you just said, they see it in isolation. They think that the stool is balancing on one leg, and as long as they can figure out that one leg, which is the finance, then everything else will naturally fall into place. But as I've clearly figured out, and so have you, Pei, that's not the case. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still remember early on when I was on this journey, my husband and I would take, and this is kind of during COVID time, so we had a lot of time on our hand. And one of the things that we did, which I still treasure, it's like best thing that we ever did for ourselves, was we will walk for about 3 to 5 miles a day. Doesn't matter what the weather was like. We just went out for a walk, and on those walks was where we had, I call, epiphany moment. And I actually started a company called Epiphany Management because of that. I call them ideas would just come into my mind, and I'm like, oh my God, right? I need to rush home and implement this idea. So those moments were more about our health as a starting point. We wanted to stay healthy, but then it turned into one of the biggest driver of our financial growth because of those ideas that came to my head. And then that actually helped strengthen our relationship as a couple as well, right? We didn't just talk about our kid or whatever. We talk about business, everything. So as a whole package of that time that we spent together, it kind of led me to when we were thinking about the name for the podcast. I was like, that's what we were looking for. We were walking and walking, searching for that, right? Financial fitness and physical fitness. And because of that, we got some clarity, right? Because we've been trained to, that's the difference of being rich versus wealthy. That discussion, that was one of the discussion we had. Like, what does that mean, right? We know a lot of rich people. They have high income, they have they good jobs, but they live in fear. They can't deploy their money. They're scared to lose it all. They work hard, and rightfully so, to accumulate a large nest egg that's just sitting there, and the fear of using that money either for enjoyment or for investment or for anything is just, they end up being the sort of a analysis paralysis situation. So
I definitely want to I want to talk on that point that you made about the walk, because that is so often, so tying into the fitness piece. Oftentimes when people think of fitness, when they think of exercise, they think of going to the gym for 1 hour, having to do and lift weights that they do not understand what to do. And fitness is much, much more than that. Right. We didn't call it finding financial workouts, right? It's not because, you can work out. That can be one component, but fitness is a bigger umbrella. And there's actual science talking about the benefits of, they call it disconnecting, where you can just take a walk out in nature. Some of the most profound artists out there that from the 1800s to now got their best inspirations just going on walks. and obviously there weren't phones at that time, but they would just walk in nature and they would make it a point to walk every single day, because that's when they could just be with their own minds, or maybe with their business partners or their life partners. And that's when things would naturally come to their mind, because they're disconnected from everything. They're distracted by nature. And surely enough, they're also exercising, right? They're getting their heart rate up. They're, especially if you're walking in the summer in this Texas heat, you're going to sweat. Like, there's multiple ways, there's multiple benefits associated with that. And that's something that when people first come and talk about their fitness journey with myself or with others, I always try to suggest as something as simple as just go for a walk, a 30-minute walk a day. I think people don't understand the value of what that could do on a daily basis. I myself try to do it every single morning. One of the first things that I wake up, I'll try to meditate and then go for a walk, because I just feel like it clears my mind. It allows me to process the events of the previous day, process any dreams that I may have had, and just allow me to think about things. And when I'm stressed or when I'm working on an idea, going on a walk, it puts things into perspective, right? And I want people to understand that that's kind of where we're trying to come at from the, and the walk is almost a spiritual type of thing, where in essence, you mentioned it, the finding financial fitness, you can actually physically do that on a walk, right? If you're trying to get your workout in, but then on your mind, you have money, well, those things kind of can be wrapped together through a walk. So you were doing it without even trying to do it, right? And it sounded like you enjoyed that a lot. And that's where, when we were talking about names for this, I knew that something that I'm very passionate about, of course, given my field in nutrition, that's where I came up in. I wanted to discuss that because I thought I had arrived. I thought I had reached what my end goal was. I set out what society and my family deemed to be successful. And then I'll never forget it, where there was last summer, I was out and about with my wife, and we were traveling literally all over the world. And I was on the beach thinking, all right, well, this is it. And I'm there and I'm thinking, hold on, this is not what I expected, right? Why am I still thinking about, why am I still having anxious thoughts? Why am I still wanting to do more? And I had to really ask myself that question, because I'd never had those conversations with anybody else or with myself. And a big part of this podcast is being able to ask those questions of others and make others ask those questions of themselves, because once they get to their destination that they think is their destination, they'll at least be able to know the path that they need to get there and what it means to actually be there.
Right. And being, having money definitely gives you options, right? That whole financial freedom thing is about having that ability to decide if I love being a teacher and this is my calling, doesn't matter if the district decides to cut back pay or whatever, doesn't matter, right? I still remember in when I was teaching in the classroom, not all the supplies can be provided by the school district. I was a science teacher. What am I going to do? I bought the supplies myself, but that's because I enjoyed it. I wanted my students to have that experience of, being able to do things and see how it works. The inner workings of a science experiment is hands-on experience.
Sure.
And what am I going to do? Just, print off paper and let them color? That's not how I learned. And that's how I wanted to make a difference in the kids back then, just when I am focused on something, I tend to get really fixated. That's the word. And so whether it was teaching or looking for financial strategies, I just go all in, right? And that whole idea of like being able to have options. Like right now, if I wanted to go back to teaching, I don't even need them to pay me. I'll just go and volunteer because I don't need them to pay, right? And that mental awareness of the ability to do something like that is very powerful. So even if someone's listening and they're not enjoying their job, find something that can make the income to allow you to go and do this same job, whatever you're doing, if that's your chosen, path, but don't do it for the money. Don't do it because you have to. You can do it. If you can do that same thing that you enjoy doing, but without the worry of money, oh, it's fantastic. You'll do it, even if it's tiring or demanding, right? So that mental shift is amazing.
Sure. No, and I think that's something that the main focus in the name itself is, financial freedom, financial independence. But I think something that goes missed is the value of time, right? It's not necessarily, because when you're financially free, what does that allow you to do? Because again, money isn't the end, right? Money is a means to get to the end, whatever your end goal is. But money isn't the end goal. Money is a tool that you can use to do the things you want to do. Well, what do you need besides money in order to do the things you need to do, right? You need time. Yeah. And there's the concept, Dan Martell writes about this in his book called Buy Back Your Time. which is quite literally, like it says, buying back your time. One of the key components, and not only did he mention this in his book, but other books, is what is your hourly rate valued at? And it's a very easy way to calculate this, right? If you go to work and you get paid $20 an hour to work 8-hour days, your time is valued at $20 an hour, right? So if there's a task out there, for example, picking up dog poop in your backyard, I've seen companies that will do it for $5. It takes them 10 minutes and you pay them $5. Okay, well, if that takes you yourself between having to get your back, having to get the dogs inside, all the mess, if it takes you 30 minutes to do that, right? That means that it's going to cost you $10 an hour to do that task, but your time is valued at $20 an hour. So if you were to offset that task and give it to somebody else at $10 an hour, that frees you up to go make $20 an hour somewhere else, whether it's at your job or picking up a second job, whatever it may be. Now you've just profited $10 an hour by arbitraging your time, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that I didn't learn, and I wish somebody would have told me that early on. Is that okay? The whole purpose of having money is to buy back your time to do the things that you want to do in your life. Don't want to go grocery shopping? Pay somebody to do it. Don't want to cook? Pay somebody to do it. There's many tasks. I would say a good majority of our to-do list or our tasks can be given and offloaded to somebody else at a cost. It just, when you become wealthier, you have more money at your disposal to offset those costs to do the things that you want to do. And I wish that, and what I want us to focus on is the time freedom, is the, okay, time's not an issue. Money's not an issue. How do you spend your day? How do you wake up every single morning and spend your day? And I think if you can answer that question, and not you just yourself, Pate, but if the audience can answer that question, that makes the journey a lot easier because you have an end destination. I personally am still identifying what does a ideal day look like, because there's some times in my mind where I'm like, I just want to be lazy today and just have leisure. But there's other times where I just want to go and I want to grind and I want to work because it's fun, right?
Absolutely. This year I've always been taught to set goals and all that kind of stuff. And to be honest, I've always just kind of like go, once that's not, that's just whatever, that's just, yeah, I have goals, I'll just kind of mention it, but I never really sat down and actually do it. But this year was the first time actually, I actually did what all the gurus have been telling me to do all these years. So it's like I wrote down like, what am I looking to do? Why do I want to do it? And kind of made a list of the things that I want to accomplish. And by golly, it's been just amazing because just the act of writing it out made me think way harder than I thought I would ever, do. Right? Just kind of thinking about it, it's floating in your head. But when you have to commit it in writing, it's just a different level of
Mm-hmm.
of thinking, and it just kind of triggers something in my mind, like, okay, well, why do I even want this? Right? Once I wrote it down, actually, I had to revise it a couple of times because I'm like, why does it even matter? Why do I even want this as my goal? So it made me think harder. Whether it was, it's easy to say, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds. Well, why? Why do I
Mm.
want to lose 20 pounds? Right?
Yep.
Because I want to be healthier. Is that if I want to get off medication? And then it made me think, well, how am I going to get? How am I going to lose 20 pounds? Right? Am I doing what I have been doing, or am I choosing the right foods? So it made me think about all the things that before, when I was kind of setting goals in my head, this time when I was setting goals on paper, it was a different experience. And it's what, June right now. 50% of the year is almost done, almost there. And
Yep.
I've amazingly, if I go back, I actually wrote on a whiteboard as well, so that I can see it more often. It's like, wow, I have already accomplished almost like all of the stuff. I went too small, right? So next year in 2025, when I do set goals, it's going to be a different experience. This is my first, I've been around for a while and doing a lot of different real estate investing and all that kind of stuff. I never set goals. I've always just heard about it, talked about it, and never actually did it. And now this time I did it. It's fantastic. So do
I,
you also do the same thing, or how do you get through your process?
I absolutely love this quote. That which gets measured gets improved. And it's, again, going back to the health and the wealth, right? With the health, it's very easy to apply that to health, because how do you know you're progressing if you don't know where you're starting and where you're going, right? You mentioned weight loss. If you want to lose 20 pounds, how do you know you've lost 20 pounds? You have to weigh yourself, right? You have to start on the scale. have to end on the scale. It's an arbitrary number. And of course, there's things that will come into play. You might gain muscle, you might lose fat. Obviously, there's metrics there. But if I want to get stronger and if I want to lift more weight, well, I need to measure what I started with and what my ultimate goal is. And it's funny because you and I had a conversation at the end of last year, beginning of this year, when we were talking about this. We were talking about our goals. And something that really stuck out to me was I was listening on another podcast about choosing a goal for 2024, choosing a goal for the year. And that word for me was intentional, right? Being intentional with what I'm doing, whether it's if I'm going to be leisurely, okay, be leisurely. If I'm going to work, then work, instead of this balance of like, oh, well, I need to work, but then I need to play, and never really being satisfied with either one. It's no, be intentional about what you're doing. And for me, that came from almost reverse engineering the goals, because my way of life had always been similar to you. Okay, well, I'm not going to set an end goal. I'm just going to work. I know that if I put X amount into my input, I'm going to get an output greater than the amount that I put in. That's all I cared about. I didn't necessarily care about the output. But then it got to the point where I had to look in and I realized, wait a second, I've achieved everything I set out to achieve throughout my lifetime. So I'm just going to keep moving the goalposts, and I will ultimately never be satisfied. And I'm sure you can relate to this, Pate. But when you reach a certain benchmark that you set out for yourself, what happens when you get there? You realize, oh, you celebrate. Maybe you go have a drink. Maybe you go, you relax, give yourself a day off. But then what? What happens the next day? Oh, I'm going to set this next goal. But if you can have those micro goals between the macro goal, you always have something to achieve. And I always understood that in the fitness world. I always understood it, but I didn't understand it in the finance world, because with the way I see it, and the way I saw it was in the fitness world, you're limited by your genetic potential, right? And I know people use that as an excuse sometimes. Oh, my genes, my genes, my genes. But there's truth. I'm 5'4". Like, I'm not going to be 5'11". Like, that's not the case. I'm not going to grow so much unless I wanted to take an enhanced, unnatural way to get bigger. And once you accept your genetic limitations, well, for me, the goal was push my genetic limitations. But in finance, with money's abundant. You can get as much money as you want. You could look at somebody like Bezos and Musk. These people have billions, trillions of dollars, right? So there is no cap, but you need to set a cap for yourself of what is going to be enough. Setting the example of what I like to call happy enough is very important. And when they hear the word enough, they think, oh, that's settling. No, it's not. It's what do you need for your life to make you happy? When will you be happy enough? And that's the question. And that's where I can then set goals of, all right, this is the goal that I want to meet that I know is going to make me happy enough. And here's the next goal that I want to meet that exponentially won't make me much happier, but it's just fun and I like the challenge. And I think that that's how the best way to do goal setting is reverse engineer it, set a big macro goal, 5-10 year goal, and then reverse engineer it back down year by year, then break it down month by month, and then week by week. It's the same thing we do in the fitness journey.
I heard this saying before, and I'm not sure if I really actually believe it. I'm curious to what you think. They state that someone out there, I don't know the quote, but any thought, like basically there's like a level, right? If you're talking about financial being happy, right? And
Right.
that number in your bank account or your earnings to reach that happiness, they say it's around like 75,000. Maybe inflation now probably more closer to 90,000.
Yeah, we're
right?
recording this in 2024. So if this is being aired in 2034, that's probably going to be a different number. But yes.
Right. But there's like a certain, baseline level. But anything that you earn above that actually doesn't really bring you that much more happiness. So, we're not here trying to chase after, Elon Musk and those kind of people. We're just ordinary people who want to live a different life, a different lifestyle than what was, kind of set up for us, right? To even like instilled in us as we were growing up, like, okay, yeah, if you're a doctor or a lawyer, right? I'm Asian, so that's a typical like, oh, what do you want to grow up to be, a doctor or lawyer or engineer? You pick, one of the three. But I truly do wonder if that's a true statement. Like, is it that once you reach a certain level, let's say all your bills have been covered, right, by your passive income, which we are currently at that stage out. Is it true that any more money that we make is not going to make us any happier? Or is it because we don't have, whoever is in that stage doesn't really have these set levels of goals that help them feel accomplished? So I'm not sure how to measure that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that quote was, it's about $75,000 that the incremental difference, right? So if you make 40,000 right now, the difference between making 40,000 and making 70,000, the increase in happiness in life is pretty exponential, tenfold.
Right.
But if you make 70,000 a year, the difference between making 70,000 and making 170,000 is not tenfold. It's maybe half of a fold, barely. Like your increase in happiness barely goes up. So that's a good question. What is it? Why is that? Why is the more money not necessarily making people happy beyond having your bills covered? And I think a lot of that has to do with what you mentioned, the fact that there are no goals set before, because it's always easier to be in the chase than it is to get out on the other side, right? Everyone thinks it's the opposite. Everybody thinks, okay, when I get there, life will be easier. But what you don't realize is you then have to start asking those questions internally. Okay, well, now that I have my bills covered, what do I have to worry about? And then if you find yourself still worrying, then you realize, wait, hold on, is there something wrong with me? Right. And I think the sooner you can ask those questions, the better. And I think it does have to do with goal setting. I think there's three numbers, and we've talked about this as well, three numbers that are very important to establish. What's your, and I learned this in The Lifestyle Investor, Justin McDonald's great book. What's the baseline level that you need to live on every single month? Not what's comfortable, but the absolute baseline to cover your expenses, living in a decent living environment. Doesn't have to be a fancy house, a very decent environment, right? What's that number? Identify that number. And this is all going to be different for every person. Step two is the middle one. Okay, identify what your comfortable life looks like, right? What does that mean? Okay, you're driving the car you want to drive. It might not be the nicest car you've ever dreamed of, but it's a car that you never thought you'd achieve as a kid. You have a nice house. You can travel as much as you want. Your expenses are covered. You can go to dinner without having to worry too much about looking at the menu, the price, so on. That's your comfortable lifestyle number. And then the third level to that, which I'll never forget, you told me this, was the FU money, right? It's the what's the dream lifestyle, where things that are beyond your imagination that you never thought you would achieve in life. Put an actual number to that. And it could be an absurd number. It could be a number you never would think you'll ever achieve in life, but put an actual number to that. And why is that? Because if you reverse, and let's say your goal to make your absolute cap where you're like, I can do everything I've ever wanted, is to make $1 million a year. To some, that sounds like a lot. To others, it doesn't. But stick with me. If you divide that and you kind of reverse engineer it and realize, okay, in order to make $1 million a year in passive income, not active income, passive income, you can say, okay, well, I need to have a $10 million portfolio to take out interest, or however you want to do your numbers. But you can reverse engineer that. Okay, I need to make this. But in order to make that, then I need to have $1 million in net worth, which will then cover step one. Once you cover step one, you go to step two. And then from step two, you don't have to go to step three, because step two is where you've reached that level of the incremental happiness is not necessarily going to increase, but you're going to want more, because why not? You're still young.
Right.
No matter what age you are, if you reach level two where your passive income is covering all your expenses, you're going to want more, because why not?
I feel like that's human nature, right?
The sooner you can accept that. Yep.
Yeah. I think it's good to recognize that in ourselves and be okay with it, right?
Sure.
I'm going to be happy and grateful for what I already have, or what I already accomplished, and what I have. These are blessings already. But I'm going to reach to the next level and see, what's my potential, right? Because, even with our brain capacity, right, our ability to do things, we're not using 100% of our potential. Absolutely not. I'll be the first one to admit that, right?
You and me both.
Right. But I'm very glad that you actually brought up the whole passive income part, right? Because when we talk about these numbers, people, I probably would, if I don't know where us, I would be like, oh, they're talking about getting another job. I'm tired already. I'm working hard as it is. We're not talking about ourselves working harder. Absolutely not. Right. The whole goal is to, I want to exit the active working part as fast as possible, right? As much as possible. I still want to be active, but I want to be active with my brain, not, active with, having to clock in, clock out, that type of work. So we are ultra focused, passive, creating passive wealth, passive income. So whatever that number, that people are using, or even ourselves are using to set goals, we're always using passive income as a goal, because, we don't know what could happen to any of us at any time. right? So our active income is nice to have, but it should be slowly should transition into passive income, so that our active income is almost like hobby money, right? If you love to, knit sweaters and sell them on Etsy and make $50, go for it, right? That's active income, because if you can't knit anymore, whatever, it's okay that you lose that income. But that passive income, I'm glad you brought it up, because I want to make that distinction.
Well, I think going on to that is when we're taught, right, to go to work, which is active income, we're trading our time for money, right? You mentioned clocking in. And the goal of making passive income is to trade our money to make more money to give us time, right? And we mentioned this early in the episode. I think this is a great place to discuss it. The difference between being rich and being wealthy. Because here's the thing. Let's say you've identified your middle tier number and you need $100,000 a year to comfortably live, where you feel like your expenses are covered, you have your car, etc. Okay, there's two completely different ways to get that. You can make it actively, going and having one or two jobs, or maybe you have a spouse that's working as well. You guys can have a couple of jobs, and there you go. You have $100,000. But then if something happens to one of you, if one of you just doesn't want to work anymore, that income goes down. Now you're not at your baseline, and then you have to go backwards, which is very difficult to go back after what was once a luxury becomes a necessity, right? So once you've tasted it, you don't want to go back. So the way to do it is to do it in a passive income way, where the money you make from your active income, ideally, you save that up, and not save it up in a Dave Ramsey style where you're just saving just for the sake of accumulation, but you're putting that money to work to get income made for you in a passive way. So when you're sleeping. So the way I view rich versus wealthy is, rich is a number, right? Rich, you can work. Physicians are rich, doctors are rich, lawyers are rich because they make a lot of money relative to what society deems as a lot. If you look at the average income for an American household and you look at what a doctor makes, you would think, okay, well, that person is rich. And it's true, they have lots of money. But the difference between being rich and being wealthy has to do with the amount of time that you're having to trade, right? Having a wealthy life means you're getting to choose how you spend your day. And wealth doesn't just mean money. In my opinion, wealth means lifestyle, living the lifestyle you want. Rich is tied into the dollar, whereas wealth is tied into lifestyle. What about you?
I also Mike and I actually use also another measurement. To us, wealth is amount of time that you can survive or live comfortably without active income. The number of days that you can live on current lifestyle, whatever your current lifestyle is, right? Your wealth is measured by how many days you can live that same lifestyle if your active income goes away. So really think about that, right? So like you're saying, right, for doctors, lawyer, whatever, yeah, they make great money, fantastic. But they also have higher expenses, right? The joke is that some of them are maybe just broke at a higher level, but just, different, same thing as everybody. They also, if they don't work, or if they don't go to work the next month, their mortgage bill is due, their car note is due, and immediately they don't have anything to protect themselves, right? So that level of wealth, it's a different measurement for everybody, but we measure it by number of days. And it's kind of gives us peace of mind when we say like, oh yeah, okay, shoot, we can pretty much take off, and if we don't want to work anymore, the active income part, we're going to be okay for a really long time. And if we are even more careful and say, hey, let's scale back a little bit, of course, a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. It will be hard to scale down, but if we were even willing to scale down a little bit, wow, we can go even further, right? Go even longer. I've always wanted to do the RV lifestyle. Maybe one day I'll put it on my goal board and make that happen and be a nomad for a year or something like that, right? So it just allows you that flexibility to think about that. Yeah.
I'd never heard it in that context. That's powerful. And it reminds me of crazy. The first book that came to my mind, as I mentioned earlier episodes, I love reading. First book that comes to my mind is 4,000 Weeks. by Oliver Berkman. And some people take this book as a little bit morbid because, you know, it puts it on an actual calendar of how much time you have left to live. So basically 4,000 weeks is just explaining that from birth until the average lifespan of an American, typically, we have about 4,000 weeks to live, right? And of course, if you think about whenever you're reading that book, whatever age you're at, well, some of those weeks are already gone, right? Unless you're right out the womb reading this great book. But you have to take that into context. And I tie that concept into this about the definition of wealth. And if you can factor, that's actually a great way to factor in, okay, how many weeks do I have left? Assuming you have a long, healthy life, live until,
Right.
let's say, 85 or 80. Okay, how many weeks do I have left? And then again, reverse engineer that. Okay, at my current lifestyle, let's say you spend 100,000 a year to live comfortably, and there's 52 weeks in a year. You can reverse engineer it. You can actually put a number attached to what you need to survive on. And that goes back to Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero, that I'm a huge fan of, which talks about the goal would be at the end of life that you die with $0 in your bank account. Now, for some, that sounds extremely scary because we don't know what's going to happen at the end of our lives in terms of healthcare costs and so on. But the goal would be to live our lives like we're going to die with zero. So if you tie those three principles in and you factor in, okay, I need to live off of $100,000 a year for the next 40, 30, 20 years, you can count how many weeks you have left. And then using your definition of wealth, you can say, okay, well, I need to have X amount net worth and assume whatever percentage to live off of. I think that's powerful. That's such a cool concept because it actually puts it into, it's not a hypothetical. It's not a, I'm going to make X amount of money. It's a real thing you could put on paper, and kind of scary at the same time, right? Because
Oh
you're
yeah.
like, you realize how far you are away from it, and then also how close you are to death. And that's again, a morbid thought, but the sooner you can come to terms with your mortality, the sooner you can come to the realization that you're not going to be here forever, the sooner you can start living the life you want to choose to live, right? And
Oh yeah.
money will become a tool to live the life that you find meaningful.
Exactly. And actually, I just last week had this thought. One of those again epiphany moments I call them. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm about to turn 50 pretty soon, and what does that mean, right? Because it's just a number. I don't feel 50 at all. But oh my gosh, if you know, and I'm a big, huge fan of IBC, a practitioner for years, and we are always very conscious of the human life, the length of life,
Mm.
and you know, they always kind of peg you to die at a certain age, right? So you're like, okay, well, if they're right, if their mathematics is correct, right, they're expecting me to live until, let's say, 90 years old, right? If I take care of myself, I only have 40 years left, right? And then I was thinking, oh my God, what did I do for the first? Like, it took me so long,
Mm.
right, from birth until 50 to accomplish what I have accomplished, right? So it was kind of like a little depressing moment that I had. Like, oh my God, I only have 40 years left. What am I gonna do with the next 40 years? It was just, I just kind of sat there and I was at a loss for a little bit. And I'm like, oh my God, 40 years, that's such a short time. I don't have that much time left. That thought entered my mind.
Let me put it
And
into weeks. That's 2,000 weeks.
right. And then I was just thinking, if you really think about it, right? And I understand, you know, now that I'm kind of like calmed down from that panic moment, I was like, okay, well, for the first, 20 years or 18 years, I was still a child, right? So that didn't count. I didn't really accomplish much, right? And then, so I have to kind of look back and be like, okay, well, so from 18 until 50, what did I do? Now, can I do more in the
Yeah.
next 4 years? So I kind of I'm starting to feel the pressure, the time crunch,
Mm.
and it's obviously is self-imposed.
Of
Nobody's
course.
giving me the pressure, but it's just a matter of thinking it through and realizing I don't have that many more weeks left, right? And what am I going to do with those time that I still have? It's a gift, right? What am I going to do with this gift of the next 40 years? Question.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this is exactly why I love our conversations. I mean, we've had these types of conversations multiple times, and I think that they're topics that some people might feel uncomfortable discussing. They're topics that some people may have never even asked themselves or had ever had that thought. And that's a big part of why I enjoy doing this podcast and why I love it, because it gives people an opportunity and an insight to look beyond the dollar bill. to look beyond what that means and to start asking what it's for. And with this episode, people were able to get a background of obviously how we met, but also how we interact, right? These conversations are very common between you and I because we're yeah, we might be at different stages in our lives, but I think we're entering a similar phase with the same goals and similar intentions of what we're trying to do. And of course, that ties into our name, right? Finding financial fitness. It ties into the importance of how to make money, how to spend money, how to live our life, how to be healthy, define what health is to us, and then use our money to enhance our quality of life with the health that we've grown into, the outcomes as a result of our training, our eating, and so forth, and making our life intentional. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do, is provide resources, provide opportunities and options for people to live a certain lifestyle that they set out to achieve. And I think that that's great. I
Yeah,
appreciate
and
it.
I'm looking forward very much to also talking to other people,
Yeah.
because I don't have the answer. You don't have the answer. We tend to be asking a lot of questions of ourselves and of each other.
Yeah.
But in this on this journey of finding those answers, I'm confident we're going to come across some great people,
Yep.
and it will be so wonderful to be able to bring a different perspective
Yep.
for our listeners as well. So yeah, definitely looking forward to continuing this thought process and conversation that we have.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining. Pei, thank you for your insights, and we look forward to chatting with everybody soon. Take care.
Take care.